Hey guys, my name is Maverick Sterling and I have an incredible story to tell. I grew up in Seattle, a city where it rains as much as we breathe. But do you know what always brightened my days? The basketball. Since I was a kid, I was hooked on this sport. By the age of 15, it had already become a total obsession. I spent hours and hours on the neighborhood court, training, sweating, dreaming of being a top player. But what really made my heart beat faster for basketball was my cousin Jackson. Man, he was more than a coach to me. He was my hero, my mentor. Jackson had been an incredible player, but an injury changed everything for him. Instead of giving up, he decided to train the neighborhood kids, including me and my younger brother Oliver. Every weekend was sacred. Oliver and I would go to Jackson's court, and he would teach us with the patience of a saint, always encouraging, always pushing us forward. That's how basketball became more than a sport for me. It was my passion, my dream, my life. But you know how it is. Life sometimes has different plans for us. And it was on one of those Saturday afternoons, playing basketball as usual, that my life completely changed. It started like a normal day, but it ended with an experience I never imagined was possible. What happened that day made me question everything I thought I knew about life, death, and what comes after. It's a hard story to believe, I know, but it's my story, and I'm here to share it with you. So get ready, because what I'm going to tell you now will shake your certainties, just as it shook mine. That Saturday started like any other. The Seattle sky was cloudy, as always, but I was too excited to care. I hadn't played for weeks because of school exams, and I was dying to get back on the court. Me, Oliver, and some friends arrived early. The rubbery smell of the basketballs, the sound of them bouncing off the concrete, it all made me electric. We started playing, and man, it was amazing. I felt light, fast, like I could fly across the court. We were in the second half when everything changed. Suddenly, a strong wind started to blow. The trees around the court were swaying like crazy. But I was so focused on the game that I didn't care much. I had just caught the ball. I was dribbling, getting ready for a dunk. That's when it happened. Out of nowhere, I felt a violent impact on my chest, right on my solar plexus. It was like someone had hit me with a baseball bat. The pain was immediate and intense. I felt a shock running through my entire body. My lungs felt like they had forgotten how to breathe. My legs went weak and I fell to the court floor. I tried to scream, to ask for help, but no sound came out. I heard Oliver and Jackson's desperate screams, but they seemed so far away. My vision started to get blurry, and I felt a wave of nausea hit me. The world around me began to spin, and I knew I was losing consciousness. The last thought I had was, is this how we die? Then everything went dark. When I regained some sort of consciousness, the first thing I thought was, phew, I'm still alive. But then I realized that something very strange was happening. I could see myself. Literally, see me. I was floating above my own body. It's difficult to describe the feeling. It was as if I were a helium balloon, only a balloon that could think and observe everything. Down below, I saw my body lying on the court. Jackson was kneeling next to me, trying to wake me up. Oliver was crying, and my friends were around with panicked expressions. The most bizarre thing is that I wasn't afraid. On the contrary, an incredible calm came over me. It was as if all the problems, all the worries had disappeared. I felt at peace. As I watched the scene, I noticed that I could see everything with incredible clarity. Every detail, every expression on people's faces. It was as if my senses had been amplified 1,000 times. It was then that I noticed something else. A light. It wasn't an ordinary light, you know? It was something more. It glowed in a way I had never seen before, emanating a feeling of peace and welcome. And for some reason I didn't understand. I felt attracted to her. I started moving towards the light. I can't explain how, since I didn't have a physical body. It was more like my conscience was being guided. As I got closer, the feeling of peace grew stronger. I looked down one last time at my body, at my friends and family. For a moment I hesitated, but the pull of the light was too strong. So, without knowing what awaited me, I let myself be carried away. And that's when my journey really began. When I walked through the light, I found myself in a place I can't quite describe. It wasn't exactly a place, you know? It was more like a state of being. Everything there seemed alive, pulsing with an energy I had never felt before. It was then that I saw him. A kind-looking gentleman with a welcoming smile on his face. He looked at me in a way that made me feel instantly at ease. The strangest thing was that I had the feeling that I knew him from somewhere, but I couldn't remember where. "Welcome, Maverick," he said, in a voice that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at the same time. "I'm here to help you find your way." I was a little confused. "Who are you?" I asked, still trying to understand what was happening. He smiled again, a smile full of understanding. "I'm someone you know well, but for now just know that I'm here to guide you." I don't know why, but that answer satisfied me. It was as if in that place, questions were not as important as feelings and sensations. The Lord reached out his hand to me, and when I took it, I felt a wave of love and understanding wash over me. It was as if he could see my entire life, all my thoughts, and accepted me completely. "You've got a journey ahead of you, Maverick," he said. "Is ready?" I didn't know exactly what I should be ready for, but something inside me told me I could trust him. So I simply nodded. And so, guided by that mysterious gentleman, I began walking, if I can call it walking, towards the unknown. Every step we took seemed to take us further from the reality I knew, and closer to something bigger. As we advanced, the environment around us changed. The light became more intense, brighter, but in a way that didn't hurt the eyes. It was as if we were entering a sacred place. Suddenly, we stopped. The man guiding me turned to me with a serene look and said, "Maverick, you are about to have a very special encounter. Open your heart and your mind." Before I could ask what he meant, I felt a presence. No, presence is not enough. It was something overwhelming, immense, that seemed to fill all the space and at the same time be inside me. And then I knew. I was before God. It was not a white-bearded figure sitting on a throne as we often imagine. It was more like infinite consciousness, a light so bright and pure that it seemed to contain all the colors of the universe. "Maverick," I heard a voice that seemed to come from everywhere. "I know your name and your heart. You have an important mission on Earth, something you have not yet completed." I was paralyzed. How to respond to God, what to say. I felt small, insignificant in front of that presence, but at the same time I felt a love so great, so unconditional that I almost couldn't bear it. The amazing thing is that I didn't feel judged. There was no condemnation for my mistakes, for the times I failed. Just understanding and an offer, a chance to make a difference, to fulfill my purpose. At that moment I understood that my life had greater meaning than I had ever imagined, that every choice, every action mattered, that I was part of something much bigger than myself. It was overwhelming and at the same time, the most liberating experience I have ever had. There, before the divine, I felt completely known and completely loved. After that indescribable encounter, I felt as if I had lived 1,000 lives in an instant. The divine presence was still reverberating in me when God presented me with a choice that would change everything: return to earth or stay in heaven. On the one hand, the idea of staying there, in that place of absolute peace and love, was tempting. There would be no more pain, no more worries, no more struggles. It would be easy to say yes and sink into that eternity of bliss. But then, I thought about my family. I saw the face of Oliver, my little brother, crying next to my body. I remembered Jackson, who had invested so much in me. I thought about my parents, my friends. How could I leave them? Furthermore, God's words echoed in my mind. I had a mission that I had not yet completed. Something important to do on earth, and that weighed on my decision. I stayed there in that non-place between worlds thinking, would it be selfish to go back just because I didn't want my loved ones to suffer? Or would it be selfish to stay and abandon my mission, whatever it was? It was then that I felt a hand on my shoulder. It was the gentleman who had guided me there. He smiled and said, "The choice is yours, Maverick. But remember, every life has a purpose. Every person has the power to make a difference." Those words hit me like lightning. I had the power to make a difference. I could go back and use this second chance for something bigger than myself. I looked at that divine light one last time, feeling gratitude for having had this experience. So, with a heart full of determination, I made my choice. "I want to go back," I said, my voice sounding firmer than I expected. The gentleman nodded, his smile full of approval. But before we could leave, he came closer and whispered something that intrigued me. "Tell your father I send my regards." Before I could ask what he meant by that, I felt a force pulling me back. It was time to return. Returning to my body was quite an experience. It was like being sucked into a whirlpool going around and around until suddenly, bam! I opened my eyes and saw myself lying in a hospital bed. The first thing I noticed was the constant beeping of the machines, then the smell of antiseptic that seemed to be everywhere. I tried to move, but my body felt too heavy. I looked to the side and saw my mother. She was sitting in a chair next to the bed with deep circles under her eyes and an expression of concern that turned to relief the moment our eyes met. "Maverick!" she exclaimed, jumping out of her chair and hugging me carefully. "Oh my God, you're awake!" It was only then that the penny dropped. I had returned. It was alive. Emotion hit me like a wave, and I felt tears streaming down my face. Soon the room was full of doctors and nurses, all asking questions and checking my vitals. I learned that I had been unconscious for 3 days. Apparently, I was hit by a branch during that sudden windstorm on the court. The impact had been so strong that my heart stopped for a few minutes. As the doctors talked about miracles and incredible luck, all I could think about was my experience on the other side. I wanted to tell everyone, explain what had happened, but something told me to wait. When we were finally alone, my mother held my hand and said, her voice breaking, "I thought we lost you, son." I looked into her eyes, full of love and relief, and I knew I had made the right choice in coming back. "I thought I was lost too, Mom," I replied. "But I think I still have a lot to do here." She smiled, not fully understanding what I meant. "But everything is fine. I had time now. Time to tell my story. Time to fulfill my mission. Whatever it was." In the days that followed, I received many visitors at the hospital. Oliver practically moved into my room, sleeping in an uncomfortable armchair every night. Jackson showed up every day, bringing basketball magazines and keeping me updated on the games I was missing. But it was my father's visit that really moved me. He entered the room with his usual serious expression, but his eyes were red, as if he had been crying. He sat down next to me and we were silent for a while. Finally, I worked up the courage and told him about my experience. I spoke about the light, about the encounter with God, and about the Lord who guided me. When I mentioned that you had sent your regards, my father turned pale. "What was he like, this gentleman?" he asked, his voice shaking a little. I described it as best I could. The gentle smile, the wise eyes, the sense of familiarity I felt when I saw him. My father stood up abruptly and went to his backpack. He came back with an old photograph in his hands. "Was it him?" he asked, showing me the photo. I am wordless. There he was, the gentleman who guided me, smiling at the camera in a photo clearly taken decades ago. "That's your grandfather, Maverick," my father said, his voice full of emotion. "My father. He passed away before you were born." At that moment, everything made sense. The feeling of familiarity, the affection I felt. It was my grandfather who had guided me on that journey between worlds. My father spent the next few hours telling me stories about my grandfather, how kind and wise he was, How he always knew what to say to comfort people. How he loved basketball and used to take my dad to play when he was a kid. "You know," my dad said with a sad smile, "I always thought you inherited his passion for basketball. I guess I was right, in more ways than I realized." That conversation changed something between my father and me. It was as if a barrier had been broken down. For the first time, I saw vulnerability in his eyes, and I felt like we were truly connecting. Before leaving, my father hugged me tightly. "I'm glad you came back to us, son," he whispered, "and glad my father was there to take care of you." That night, I fell asleep with a smile on my face, feeling closer to my family than ever before. The following weeks were of intense recovery, physiotherapy, exams, medical appointments. My body was healing, but my mind was on a journey of its own. I couldn't stop thinking about my experience. Every detail seemed engraved in my memory. The encounter with God, the feeling of absolute peace, the choice to return. All of this was constantly spinning in my head. Jackson came to visit me almost every day, bringing videos of basketball games for us to watch together. During one of these visits, I gathered courage and told him about my experience. "You know, Maverick," he said, after listening in silence, "some would say it was just your brain reacting to the lack of oxygen. Others would say it was a miracle. What matters is what it means to you." Your words made me reflect. What really mattered was not convincing others of what had happened, but understanding what that experience meant to me and how it would change my life from now on. I started to see the world in a different way. The little things that used to irritate me seemed so insignificant now. I started to value moments with my family and friends more. And most of all, I started to think seriously about what my mission in life would be. One night, as I lay in the dark of my hospital room, I had an epiphany of sorts. Maybe my mission wasn't something grand and epic. Maybe it would be something simpler, but no less important. Living each day with purpose, spreading kindness, making a difference in the lives of those around me. I decided that when I got out of the hospital, I would start volunteering. I wanted to help other people who were going through difficult times, just as I had been helped. And basketball? Well, he was still my crush. But now, it was more than a dream of fame and success. It was a way to connect with others, to inspire and be inspired. As my discharge approached, I felt a mixture of anxiety and excitement. I was ready to start my second life, to honor the chance I had been given. And deep in my heart, I knew that my grandfather, my guide, would be with me every step of the way. The day of my discharge finally arrived. When I left the hospital, the world seemed different. The colors were brighter, the air fresher. It was as if I was seeing everything for the first time. In the months that followed, I kept my promise. I started volunteering at a children's hospital, playing basketball with children undergoing treatment. Seeing the smiles on the faces of those little warriors reminded me daily of why I had chosen to return. I went back to school and basketball practice, but with a new perspective. It was no longer about being the best or winning at all costs. It was about the joy of the game, about working as a team, about overcoming challenges. One night, about 6 months after the incident, I had a vivid dream. My grandfather appeared, as real as my near-death experience. He smiled and said, "I'm proud of you, Maverick, but remember, your journey is just beginning. August 2024 will bring something important. Be prepared." I woke up with my heart racing. August 2024? That was almost a year from now. What could happen? For a moment I felt scared, but then I remembered everything I had been through, how I had grown and changed. Whatever it was, I would be ready. I decided not to tell anyone about the dream. Instead, I intensified my efforts. I trained harder, studied harder, dedicated more time to volunteering. If something important was coming up, I wanted to be in the best shape possible, physically, mentally, and spiritually. And so, the days passed. Every morning was a new opportunity to make a difference, to live with purpose. Sometimes I found myself looking up at the sky, thinking about my grandfather, about God, about the experience that changed my life. I felt a mixture of gratitude and expectation. Now, as I tell this story, I am waiting. August 2024 is coming, and with it, whatever fate has in store for me. I don't know what will happen, but I know I'm ready to face it. My near-death experience taught me that life is precious, that every moment counts. It taught me about love, purpose, and the interconnectedness of all things. And most of all, it showed me that there is more to this world than we can see or understand. So here I am, Maverick Sterling, student, basketball player, volunteer, someone who died and came back, someone who is learning day by day to live fully and with purpose. And you? What is your history? What motivates you? What makes you wake up every morning with a smile on your face? Remember, each of us has a mission, a purpose. Sometimes it takes a near-death experience to make us realize this, but do not need be like that. You can choose to live each day as if it were a second chance, because deep down, that's exactly what every day is, a new opportunity to make a difference.